Before we begin, I have just one request. Put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and let the world outside fade away. Because some stories aren't just meant to be heard, they're meant to be felt. Every whisper, every breath, every sound behind you might not be just in the story. So, are you ready? Let's begin. The sun in Florence was relentless. It pressed down on Caroline's skin like iron, gleaming off centuries old marble until her eyes watered. She wiped her brow and adjusted her hat. Her husband, Neville, stood with his camera raised, aiming it at a cracked fresco, his attention fixed on angles and exposure rather than the woman beside him. They had been married for 3 months, and already she felt herself evaporating. She didn't mind Florence, the art, the stone streets, the smell of citrus in the afternoon, but with Neville, always speaking, always instructing, everything felt like a lesson she hadn't asked for. Caroline, the painting on the left, look at the contrast of light. That's Caravaggio's chiaroscuro. Don't just walk past it. She had nodded again and again, her silence mistaken for submission. That morning, she woke early, dressed quietly, and scribbled a note she didn't even sign. Just one line. I want to explore on my own today. The countryside was different, wild and unmapped. It welcomed her with tangled olive trees and distant mountains that shimmered like whispers. She walked along a dusty path, past thorned hedges and unmanned vineyards, and then she saw it. A tower, far away on a hill, rising above the fields like a stone finger pointed at the sky. A strange thrill ran through her. She didn't know why it called to her. Perhaps because it wasn't in any brochure. Perhaps because Neville hadn't told her to look at it. It was hers, entirely hers. The climb to the hill was brutal in the heat. Her shoes, meant for sightseeing, weren't made for rough paths. She slipped twice, brushed her palms against thorns, and cursed under her breath, but she didn't turn back. When she reached the base of the tower, she hesitated. It was older than she expected. Ancient, maybe. The stone had darkened to the color of old bone. Moss crept around the edges, and the arched wooden door hung crooked on its hinges. She touched the wood. It groaned and opened with a sigh. Inside was cool, smelling of damp air and thyme. And there, coiling upward in a narrow spiral, were stone steps. Caroline smiled to herself, the first real smile in weeks. She placed her hand on the rough wall and began to climb. 1, 2, 3. Each step echoed, her breath light and amused. The staircase wound tightly, forcing her to stay close to the wall. Light streamed from thin slits, offering glimpses of the countryside far below. She felt liberated. Every step felt like a rebellion, a release. 42, 43. She paused once to catch her breath and touched her lips, thinking of Neville. Would he even notice she was gone? That thought made her climb faster. By the 70th step, something shifted. The air changed, thicker, still cool but no longer refreshing, and the silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It pressed in on her, heavy and listening. She kept climbing, but the slits in the walls grew smaller, less light came through. She thought perhaps it was the angle. She squinted up, expecting to see brightness from an opening at the top, but it was only dark above her, black, endless, consuming. Still, she climbed. 95, 96. Her breaths were louder now, her legs aching, but she couldn't stop. The sense of being watched had deepened, deepened. She turned once, expecting to see someone behind her. No one, only the narrow spiral below. Shadows pooling on the steps. She laughed nervously. Get a grip, Caroline. At 120, the spiral staircase began to narrow. She brushed both elbows against the walls now. The tower seemed to pulse around her like it was breathing slowly. That's when she saw something etched into the stone. Just a single word, scratched over and over again. Sendi. She didn't know Italian, but something in her blood chilled at the word. A warning? A plea? She touched it. The stone was wet. She looked at her fingers. Red. Her knees buckled slightly. She wiped the blood on her dress, heart thudding like thunder in her ears. She should have turned around then. She should have, but she didn't. 150. The light was gone. She used the flashlight on her phone. It barely reached a few feet ahead. The steps now were irregular, crumbling, covered in dust so thick it felt like ashes. Her thoughts were no longer clear. She imagined the tower growing, stretching upward as she climbed, like it didn't want her to reach the top, or like it had no top. She paused. What had been the goal? The view? The thrill? Now it felt like a trap. She tried to go down, but the moment she turned, the flashlight flickered and went out. She tried again, pressed the power button, nothing. And in that moment of darkness, she heard breathing, not hers, heavy, labored right behind her. She froze. A whisper. Keep going. She turned terrified. No one. She climbed again. It wasn't logic anymore. It was instinct, survival. 204. Her hand bled from dragging along the wall. Her vision swam. She was sweating and freezing at the same time. The walls began to feel closer, not metaphorically, physically. She had to twist sideways to move. She couldn't stretch her arms, couldn't breathe deeply. The stone pressed against her chest. Her back scraped against the other side. It was like being buried alive. She screamed. It echoed once, then vanished. No reply. Not even birds outside. Was there even an outside anymore? Her thoughts became jagged. How long had she been climbing? Hours? Days? Her phone said 3:06 p.m. It had said 3:06 p.m. for the last dozen steps. Time had stopped. So had hope. At one point, she no longer counted the steps. She could barely move. She crawled now, fingers bleeding, knees bruised, face slick with sweat and dust. Ahead, she saw it. A door. It was made of black iron, old, rusted, but real. She cried in relief, reached for the handle, but the door didn't open. It wasn't locked. It wasn't stuck. It was fake, carved into the wall, a cruel illusion. She collapsed, screaming, pounding her fists against it until her skin tore. And behind her once again, breathing. Closer now, warm, wet, a whisper that made her bones seize up. You should have turned around. She didn't remember blacking out. She woke lying flat on the stone, cold, disoriented. Something had changed. She looked around and realized she was facing down. The staircase behind her now descended, but she had been climbing. Hadn't she? She didn't know anymore. All she knew was the steps now spiraled down into darkness, deeper than her mind could process, and behind her, no wall, just open space and the breathing. Caroline stood, her legs shook. She placed her hand on the wall and started to descend. They found her body 3 weeks later. A hiker had spotted the tower, half hidden by overgrowth. Authorities said the structure was unstable, unsafe. They found her at the base of the stairs, fingers broken, lips torn from biting down, eyes wide open in terror. She had scratched a word into the stone with her nails. Sendi. They never figured out why. But you understand now. Caroline? Caroline was not killed by a monster with claws or fangs. She was undone by the illusion of freedom, by a tower that punished those who sought meaning in isolation, that devoured curiosity, that reversed direction when you thought you were rising, a stone phallus of control pretending to offer escape. In the end, she didn't climb into the light. She was always descending. And so might you. If you ever find yourself counting steps in a tower that doesn't end,